Welcome to Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and joining me today is Mitch Dion, who is the General Manager at the Calaveras County Water District. Welcome, Mitch.
Hi, Joel. Glad to be here.
So how long have you been in your current position? You're fairly new over there.
Relatively new. 6 months is still just brand new.
6 months, and we'll talk a lot more about CCWD. But before we get into a little history about you and some of the other intricacies of the district, I wanted to let people know that there is an upcoming rate increase that has been proposed, and they'll have a chance to attend some community meetings to talk about that in the coming months. So can you let people know when those meetings?
Yes, Joel, thanks. Actually, we have one coming up on Monday, June 10th. This one will be up in the Ebbets Pass area. And we also have one coming up on Tuesday, June 25th, and that'll be down the Copperopolis area. And then in Valley Springs, La Contenta, we will have one on Thursday, June 27th. And those will all lead up to the public hearing, which is actually the rate hearing on July 10th.
July 10th. So if people are interested in having their questions answered, those are good things to attend, but there also is a ton of info on your website, right?
There is a ton of info and more to come. Ultimately, anyone that's interested in hearing more details about the CCWD rates should go on the website or contact us here at the district office.
Okay. Now on to introducing the Calaveras County public to you, because you have never lived here, but you are a little familiar with the area throughout your time in the Sierra and growing up in the area.
That's right. I grew up not so far away, and I spent some time working at Sonora Pass.
Tell me, where did you grow up, Mitch?
You know, I grew up outside the Sacramento area, mostly in and around the foothill communities, but I had the unique childhood of growing up as the son of a camp director up in the Soda Springs area. And so I spent most of my misspent youth, if you will, living in the Sierras, living up and around Soda Springs and Donner Lake area. It was a camp that was owned and operated by the San Juan Unified School District. It was Camp Arcade at the time. And so it was actually developed in the 50s as an opportunity to take suburban and urban kids into a wilderness or outdoor experience, because there was concern at that time in the 50s that people were not getting enough time outdoors and in the wilderness environment.
Imagine how much that concern has been elevated in today's world, yet it seemed like at that time schools took it a little more seriously somehow.
You know, I think schools had a different role at that time. I think that the environmental awareness and education that we saw in schools was part of a more holistic curriculum. I think that the schools today they have their hands full with dealing with other classroom issues as opposed to trying to promote the broader wellness and well-being of some of the students.
When you were a young man traipsing through the Sierra, what were some of the things that kept you busy?
Well, most of the legal ones were simply a lot of hiking. We hiked from Tahoe to Yosemite. We would hike north into towards Lassen, and so we had a great deal of experience hiking along the Pacific Crest Trail as it was becoming the Pacific Crest Trail. We worked with teenage groups that were doing Operation Challenge type of adventure training, a lot of rope work, a lot of rock climbing, and just having those types of experiences.
And also, you kind of worked at the camp, taking care of some things, and that's when you first got introduced to some of the water-related things?
Ultimately, we were always in hot water, so it seemed as a natural transition to learn to operate the camp systems, which included the water and wastewater systems for the camp. So we had a pump system and a disinfection system, and so moving raw lake water up the hill, disinfecting it, providing it back through the camp for drinking water was part of our responsibilities from as young as I can remember.
Did you ever come to a realization that those skills might be something you did with your future?
You know, ultimately, I didn't think of them as skills for the future. I thought it as a way of life. I didn't realize that not everyone took care of their water systems. Not everyone disinfected their water or tested their water to see what kind of other pathogens might be there.
As you moved into your college years, did you attend a university somewhere?
I did. I attended a couple colleges. I was at the American River Community College, and I went on to ultimately California State University, Sacramento, and then did my graduate work at University of Southern California. However, along the way, I joined the Marine Corps, And so when I enlisted in the Marine Corps, I was not a college grad, and so I was a young infantry reconnaissance Marine for a couple years.
And you spent quite a few years in the Marine Corps. How long was that?
I spent about 15 years on active duty and followed it with 16 years of reserve time.
That's a long time in the military.
Went by like that.
And I think just to let people know the experience that you have, you did a lot of things that kind of, in a way, prepped you for what you're doing now.
Absolutely. I was an engineer officer, and so ultimately operating the base and base systems is a lot like operating cities. You had water, wastewater, stormwater systems, and those utilities were always places where it was very interesting for me, and I always gravitated towards them. It was one thing to be landing jets coming down and hitting a little piece of asphalt, but my eyes were never good enough. So I was fortunate that I got a lot of work experience in and around water and wastewater systems, and got a fair background in just general engineering skills.
Another thing that you said, which I thought was kind of neat, was even before it was required by the government to do so, some of the opportunities you had in your positions were to maybe do projects that were almost voluntary, and then later they became required.
Yeah, and that was a very interesting thing. When people think about the Marine Corps, they don't necessarily think of the Marine Corps bases and some of the leading things that we did. So I was very fortunate in dealing with some of the environmental issues. We had some serious environmental issues, and getting out in front with remediation projects. We were doing a fair amount of research for in situ types of treatment to deal with our spills. We had to deal with other types of issues, stormwater runoff from industrial facilities, and trying to do stormwater cleanup, and making sure and testing and piloting some of the systems that later became best management practices, but certainly became foundations for what the regulators expected for minimum compliance.
And that was kind of made possible by some economic boom times where maybe there was more money than there might be.
Absolutely. We came into the 80s, and the Marine Corps bases, so most of the military bases, became much better funded, and we had to address those pending issues that were backlog issues that needed to be addressed.
You moved on to a different chapter of your life after the Marine Corps, and then you did several different things. One was, I think, a city manager. You also did some water things with very large companies, and you also were in school administration. Is that right?
Yes, I spent a couple of years as a college administrator. It was quite a fun time. But what I learned was that it was not a place for me to be.
You did, after trying some different careers out, realize there is kind of a place for you, and do you think that the current position you have with CCWD is the right fit?
We enjoy it a lot. My family and I enjoy the foothill communities. We enjoy being here. I personally like the challenges here at CCWD. We have a broad mix of things to always keep a tinkler like myself busy doing something. Whether it's working in a wastewater plant or looking at water treatment data, those are the types of things that have always interested me the most.
How did you come to be the general manager at CCW, and who did you replace?
I replaced the previous general manager was June Lopez. June was here for a short while, and prior to her was Dave Andrews. I came here out of San Diego. I came a circuitous route because I was actually general manager in the Sacramento area, and then had gone over to Nevada for a short time, and then spent about 6 years as a general manager in the San Diego area.
And was it something that you were looking for as in a new position, or did you get recruited by this county?
I was always keeping an eye for the foothill communities. The Sierra foothills and the Sierras in and around Lake Tahoe have always been the place where I've tried to call home. And so as much as possible, I'm very interested in staying within this region.
Now that you have been in the job for 6 months, what are some of the things that you really love about Calaveras County in particular?
Well, Calaveras County in particular is unique. It truly is. And one of the things is people come to Calaveras deliberately. You don't accidentally come to Calaveras driving through as if you would in highway 80 heading over, so you might discover some things in Placer County accidentally, or if you're heading Highway 50 to Lake Tahoe, you might discover things. But if you come to Calaveras County, you came to Calaveras County, and you're gonna find some unique things. And as a result, I think there's still a lot of unspoiled things here in Calaveras County that we don't. The downside is we don't benefit from some of the traffic and some of the economic components that go with that. The positive side is we still have great places to discover and great places to spend our time.
Absolutely. When you're here, I know you still live a little ways away, but you might bring the family into the county soon. That hasn't happened yet, has it?
That has not happened yet.
Okay. But do you do any hikes in the area or anything like that?
We do. In fact, I was up at, I hate to say it, but I was up at Lake Alpine last week without my family.
Oh, okay.
I was working. And so I do get out as often as I can into the area to enjoy it.
The county is big. It's spread out, and there aren't really that many people here. So when you look at the county from a water provider perspective, it's challenging. But we also have a lot of water coming down out of the Sierra. So let's let people know a little bit more about CCWD. And first of all, how did it all get started?
Well, Calaveras County Water District got started in 1946, and it's been on operation since 1947. And it was chartered by the state of California. So although it's Calaveras County water, it's not a reference to the county government. It's more of a reference to our service area. Our responsibilities include the water resource planning for the entire county. There's over 1,000 square miles within Calaveras County. Most of it's headwaters or source water area for the state of California. It's a very crucial component in the Central Sierras and part of the mix of California's water supply system. It is a unique challenge because here in Calaveras, our water systems don't have as many connections per mile of pipe, whether it's on a sewer side or whether it's the domestic water distribution. And so without some of those population densities, we're always struggling with the issues of how many connections and what the denominator really is to spread costs across. We do have significant water resources, and there are very high quality water resources. And so it's really nice to actually be able to serve a drinking water product that is a very good product.
How many connections do you have on the water and then sewer side?
On the water side, we have about 13,000 connections, and those spread through service areas from small ones on the western side, like Wallace or Southworth, to West Point up high, and then Everett's on Highway 4 corridor. We have several systems, but our largest two systems are in the Valley Springs, Jenny Lind, and as well as over in the Copper area.
And the water comes from which rivers?
Well, it's a variety depending on where you're at. We have water that come off of Bear Creek or the McCollum system. And that serves the West Point area. We have some water supply that comes off of Lake Hogan, which is Calaveras River. And we have some water supplies that come off the Stanislaus River.
So you pretty much have a finger in everything, it sounds like.
We would hope so.
Okay. And
or a straw.
Or a straw, perhaps. And in terms of the number of people who get all of these things to work, how many staff do you have?
There are 64 people working at Calaveras.
That's a lot.
So we have 64 employees that are working hard every day and making sure that what we're doing is a safe and reliable drinking water product, and we're meeting all of our compliance standards for the wastewater.
Another thing that I don't know if everyone knows is the Calaveras County Water District has moved beyond water and sewer. There's also some hydro
That's correct.
generating facilities. Well, tell me about those.
We have two hydro generation facilities. One is at Hogan, and that one had become ours, and we actually operate that via Modesto Irrigation District. And then the other facility is better known to folks, which is the Cullival system at Spicer. And so that system is actually owned by Calaveras County Water, and it's operated by NCPA.
The water rights system is very confusing and convoluted, and I've even heard some people at CCWD say maybe they don't understand everything, but I know that you are an expert. And we can't go into all of it, but one thing that you've kind of emphasized to me is water rights are crucial to the county's future. And CCWD seems to have a great interest in protecting those, and you need to kind of keep up to speed with what's going on in order to protect those things. What's your impression after being here for 6 months on the status of the water rights here?
Well, first of all, I would hate for anyone to think that I'm representing myself as an expert on water rights. That's certainly a much more complicated arena. However, Calaveras County Water does have a large, diverse portfolio of water rights. Managing those water rights is a pretty complicated issue all to itself, because when you get into water rights, there's some very simple things that most of us understand. What's a water right for consumptive purposes, and what's a water right for electrical generation purposes? Then you have water rights that exist in one kind of water condition, water year condition, and water rights that don't exist in a different kind of water condition. You have water rights that have points of usage or points of diversion, and so you end up with a broad array of water right issues. And so as you start to actually manage the water rights, it really is a obligation, but also a great opportunity for Calaveras County Water in order to use our resources for the best interests of the citizens of Calaveras County.
Staying abreast on water rights and protecting them is part of what you do. What other things are under your responsibilities as the general manager?
Well, as the general manager, I'm really responsible for the day-to-day administration and operations of the district. And so that means that while the board of directors will establish the policy, I'm responsible to ensure that their policy is turned into implementation and administrative action. So I am responsible to oversee the human resources components. I'm over the engineering. I have a special compassion for the water resource and the technical components. I spend a lot of my time there as it's just following my interest. And then I'm just ensuring that the day-to-day levels of service are there and that we're delivering to the customers a safe and reliable drinking water, which includes the fire protection, by the way. Most people forget about. That's part of our drinking water system, is making sure that those hydrants are charged for when we have the fires, as well as making sure that our wastewater treatment is done in compliance with the state of California.
Is the job pretty much what you expected, or have you had any surprises?
Oh, I've had surprises every day, and if I didn't, I'd be disappointed. Ultimately, the job is always full of surprises. I think here at Calaveras, what has been a very positive surprise is the interest of the employees and the people that are interested in delivering high levels of service, and they're wanting to take ownership and deal with the customers in our service areas. We have very diverse service areas, very diverse interests within the Calaveras County communities, and the folks that are working at Calaveras County Water seem really in tune to that, and that was a real positive surprise.
It's a big system. You have lots of customers. You're by far the biggest water utility in the county. And how many are there in the county, roughly?
There's a handful of public utilities here in the county, and there's also several other smaller mutual or privately owned utilities.
So a lot of them.
A lot.
But CCW is the biggest.
Yes, although we're a relatively small utility by utility standards, within Calaveras County we are the largest.
So when there's any kind of a discussion about rates, it's impacting the most people, and the communities often become a buzz. And so as we said earlier, there is a proposal CCWD released which said we are looking to increase rates. So for those who haven't heard about it, what is that proposal all about?
That proposal is a very significant rate increase, and the rate increase would deal primarily, relatively exclusively, with investing or reinvesting in the capital infrastructure. We have a system in which we see real substantial failures and deficiencies occurring, and so in order to address those problems, we have to get serious about having the resources in order to bring in contractors and get the fixes in place. These repairs and improvements were all identified in 2007 and prior, and part of our 2008 study. Because of the lack of growth in the system, the lack of ratepayers to expand, those repairs weren't done. They were held in abeyance. The economy was such that it didn't make sense for the board of directors to be looking for additional monies to be spent at that time. So we're now 5.5, 6 years down the road, and those repairs are still needing to be done. So we're looking for a substantial rate increase in order to fund those improvements and repairs of the system.
What type of a rate increase are we looking at? Like over the next 5 years, how much would it?
Across the next 5 years, we're talking about, depending on whether it's the water or wastewater, approximately 60%, and it can be compounded, so it's a fairly substantial rate increase. The first year is the most substantial, and it's 18%.
And what does that mean for like an average person who's paying a water bill?
For the average water customer, it's about $10. For the average wastewater customer, it'll be about $11. So it is a very substantial rate increase. What I like to say about rates is there really are three parts to rate making. One is the engineering, the technical piece. Go out, look at, identify, project for life expectancies, address the deficiencies of the system, do the engineering work that's there. That work is done in 2008 in this case. And then there's the financial piece, is based upon these needs, what's the best financial tool to get the resources needed to do what the engineering said needed to be done. And so they map it out to be the most efficient process. Either, in our case, we felt that minimizing debt was the most efficient use of the ratepayer money to go about addressing these deficiencies in the most timely fashion in order to pick up the ones that were critical first. So we really had over $50 million worth of projects that were identified, and we're really looking at trying to address about $12 million on the water and about $12 million on the wastewater in the next 5 years. And so this is just the first bite at a much larger piece. Our goal is, through using this 5 years worth of rate increases, is to create a sustainable funding source so that we can continue to fund our capital replacement and improvement program going forward, so that we don't take these additional rates that we're looking for in this 5-year process and use it for O&M. We want to dedicate this to become the ongoing funding mechanism so that we reinvest in the system and keep the infrastructure serving the public as it's intended. Today was a classic example. In Arnold, we had a water line break again today. Same water line is broken many times. It's the substandard material in which it was constructed in. So the customers in Arnold had to deal with another utility service interruption. So for those businesses that are in Arnold that were dependent upon having water service in order to prepare the evening restaurant business, or in order to deal with the customers that were going home for the evening, they had a service interruption. Those service interruptions are then having to be repaired based upon the timing of the not of choice. And so ultimately, if we end up having to call in a contractor, or we have to do it with our own forces using overtime, it's the most expensive way to go about doing repair and replacement. So running systems to breakdown is a really expensive way to operate them, as opposed to going in when your engineering and financial tools have all been laid out well, and now you're in to take care of the infrastructure in a responsible, proactive manner.
Some people might say, but it's on the backs of the ratepayers. But you're saying if you borrowed the money and then paid the interest on that and maybe did it, and then the ratepayers would have to pay for it at some point. So you're saying after your analysis, doing a large rate increase really makes the most sense, and in the long term actually is the best use of that money?
It is the most efficient use, and our board of directors looked at that really, really careful, because interest rates are very favorable right now, and so it was difficult to explore, and in order to mitigate, particularly in this first couple of years, to have enough money to start making some meaningful investment in we could have borrowed the money. But if you borrow the money, two things happen. Not only do you have to pay the interest, but you have the ongoing obligation against your O&M dollars. Currently,
O&M is?
Operation and maintenance, thank you. Currently, out of our normal O&M budget, we're spending about $2 million a year on debt service already. And so in order to continue to put more and more burden on the ratepayer for debt service, which includes that non-productive yield of interest, it didn't make sense to the board of directors. And that's why they're trying to avoid any long-term debt at all with this program.
Why wasn't this why wasn't this set up earlier with this, let's proactively fix all these things and let's keep this preventative maintenance happening? Why are we starting with this now?
You know, it's always a difficult thing. I think that in 2008, as I said, they've identified all this work, but also in 2008, the economy was different. They were still expecting a number of connections, additional 2,000 connections to the system. Had we had that additional 2,000 connections to the system, we would now have 2,000 additional ratepayers to help share this burden, and that would be very significant when you consider that proportion of that to, say, a 14,000 customer utility. So you would have that many more people to share the burden with. The economy was different, so the projections were different. In the early 2000s, in order to keep rates down and not do rate increases for a period of about 8 years, from 2000 to 2008, the board was using reserves. And so the board was choosing to avoid this rate increase and was using the reserves in the system.
So those are kind of the reasons why it's happening now. Times have changed. This is the best decision at this point. But what if the customers say, no way, we don't want it? What if they sign these petitions and 50% of the customers plus one say, we don't want this? Then what happens?
Well, I think I want to go back first on the 50% plus one, because you got it exactly right. And so I just want to repeat that so people really understand what we're talking about. If a simple majority, 50% plus one of the property owners for the properties that are customers within the district do file a protest, then the current 218 rate proposal that we have cannot be enacted. Anything less than that, a rate increase up to those amounts can be enacted by the board of directors. Obviously, they're taking customer feedback very seriously, and that's part of the good rate making process. If in fact that happens, we're going to have to go back and figure out what else do we do. Certainly, as you look to, say, the newspaper just as recently as yesterday, where Groveland Community Service District has $1 million in fines. Well, they negotiate down to $360,000 worth of penalties that they're going to pay. Well, that's exactly what happens if you don't fund these types of improvements. We have failures in the system, and particularly on the wastewater side, the regulators will be there to fine us. And if we think paying interest is a waste of ratepayer money, paying fines is really an irresponsible use of the ratepayer money.
So what you have emphasized to me is running something to the point of failure and not increasing rates is more expensive, much more expensive in the long run than doing a proactive fundraising campaign to fix things before they break. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Okay. If people want to find out more, Mitch, they can call CCWD or visit the website?
They can call CCWD or visit the website or come to one of our 3 public hearings that we're having.
And give that information one more time for me.
Let me tell you, it's on June 10th, and this will be at the Ebbets Pass area. On June 25th, it will be in Copper. And in June 27th, we're going to be in Valley Springs. And for the exact locations and times, I'd ask people to check on the website so I don't get confused and misinform anyone.
Sounds good, Mitch. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining me on this edition of Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and I hope to see you right here next time.